Deep beneath the Earth's surface lies a world of eternal darkness, where brave explorers venture into nature's most treacherous labyrinths. These are true stories of survival, tragedy, and the thin line between adventure and disaster. Today, we delve into bone-chilling tales of people who found themselves trapped in the depths below. The Mossdale Caverns Nightmare. What drove 6 experienced cavers to venture into unmapped territory on that fateful day in 1967? The answer lies in England's notorious Mossdale Caverns, a maze-like system that would become their tomb. John Ogden and his 5 companions were 3.2 kilometers deep in unexplored territory when nature unleashed its fury. Heavy rains transformed the peaceful creek outside into a raging torrent, flooding the cave's entrance. In the depths below, the group heard the first rumbles of approaching doom. As freezing water rushed through the narrow tunnels, the team desperately searched for higher ground. Ogden spotted a small crack above and managed to squeeze through, finding a pocket of precious air. But the space was too small for anyone else. He could only watch helplessly as his friends succumbed to the rising waters below. The water continued to rise, inch by inch, in the pitch-black chamber. Ogden pressed himself against the ceiling, each breath becoming more precious than the last. The temperature dropped steadily, and hypothermia began to set in. Hours stretched into an eternity as he fought to stay conscious, knowing that sleep meant certain death. For days, Ogden remained trapped in that tiny crevice, his head barely above water, fighting for each breath. The complete darkness and isolation played cruel tricks on his mind. He could still hear the echoes of his friends' final moments, their voices mixing with the sound of rushing water. When rescuers finally reached the scene days later, they found a sight that would haunt them forever. In that narrow passage, Ogden's body remained wedged in the crevice, his last desperate attempt to survive frozen in time. Below him, his 5 companions had succumbed to the floodwaters. The Mossdale Caverns had claimed 6 lives in what would become one of Britain's worst caving disasters, a grim reminder of nature's raw power and the price of underground exploration. The dark secret of Poganica Bay. In the crystal-clear waters off Croatia's coast, a routine dive in 2002 led to the discovery of a chilling mystery. At the bottom of an underwater cave, 54 meters below the surface, lay a body with a knife lodged in its chest. But this was no murder. It was something far more disturbing. MK, an experienced cave diver, had embarked on what should have been a standard exploration. The cave system beneath Poganica Bay was known for its challenging passages, but nothing beyond his capabilities. As he ventured deeper into the underwater labyrinth, something went wrong. The complex network of tunnels began to look unfamiliar, each passage identical to the last in the beam of his diving light. With oxygen running low and panic setting in, he found himself trapped in the maze-like passages. His breathing quickened, consuming precious air faster than planned. Training taught him to stay calm, but primal fear began to take hold. As his air supply dwindled, he desperately searched for escape, finding only dead ends and darker passages. In a last-ditch effort for survival, MK swam upward, finding a small air pocket between rocks. But the stale air wasn't enough to sustain him. His options were running out as quickly as his oxygen. The reality of his situation became crystal clear. He was trapped, alone, in the darkness of the deep. Faced with the horrifying prospect of a slow drowning, MK made an unthinkable choice. Drawing his diving knife, he made a decision that would puzzle investigators for weeks. Rather than suffer the agony of drowning, he chose a quicker end. The medical examiner would later confirm the wound was self-inflicted. His final act revealed the terrifying reality of cave diving. Sometimes the greatest horror isn't the darkness itself, but what it drives people to do. The case of MK stands as a chilling reminder of the psychological toll of being trapped beneath the earth, where the line between survival and desperation becomes razor thin. The Ghost of Sterkfontein. What compels someone to break every safety rule in pursuit of the unknown? Peter Verhulsel's story serves as a grim reminder of the price of curiosity. In 1984, he ventured into South Africa's Sterkfontein Caves, ignoring the lifeline that was meant to guide him home. Peter was known among his diving companions for pushing boundaries. The Sterkfontein cave system, with its complex underwater passages, seemed to call to his adventurous spirit. Despite clear protocols and safety lines designed to prevent tragedy, Peter's curiosity repeatedly drew him away from the designated path. 3 times he strayed from the safety line, exploring unauthorized passages. His friends watched with growing concern as he disappeared into the darkness, always returning with tales of undiscovered chambers. But the 3rd deviation proved fatal. Lost in the underwater maze, Peter's air supply began to run dangerously low. In a stroke of desperate luck, he discovered a small underground island, a temporary refuge that would become his final resting place. As he pulled himself onto the rocky shore, Peter realized the magnitude of his mistake. He was completely cut off from the outside world, with no way to signal for help. For 6 weeks, Peter endured total darkness and isolation. The cave's constant temperature kept him alive, but thirst and hunger slowly took their toll. He had no food, no light, and only the dripping of water for company. In those long hours of darkness, Peter's thoughts turned to his family, knowing they must be searching frantically for him. When rescuers finally reached the chamber, they found a scene that told the story of his final days. Peter's wasted body lay near the water's edge, but it was his last message that brought tears to their eyes. Scratched into the sand were his final words: "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." The cave had claimed another victim, leaving behind only bones and a heartbreaking farewell to those he loved. The double tragedy of Bushman's Hole. What drives a person to risk everything to recover a stranger's body? In 2005, Dave Shaw descended into South Africa's treacherous Bushman's Hole with a noble purpose: to bring closure to a grieving family. But at 270 meters below the surface, good intentions would lead to a chilling turn of events. A decade earlier, Dion Dreyer had lost his life in these same dark waters. His body lay undisturbed in one of the deepest cave systems in the world, until Shaw discovered it during a record-breaking dive. Instead of leaving it behind, Shaw made a fateful promise to return and recover Dion's remains. In January 2005, Shaw began his final descent. Everything went according to plan until he reached Dion's body. As he attempted to place it in a body bag, the corpse began to deteriorate. The head separated, and suddenly the body became buoyant, threatening to float away. Shaw's breathing quickened as he struggled to control the situation. Each rapid breath fed more carbon dioxide back into his rebreather system than it could handle. The poisonous gas began to cloud his judgment, but he refused to abandon his mission. After 5 exhausting minutes, Shaw finally attempted to ascend. But fate had one final twist. His light cord had become entangled with the guideline attached to Dion's body. As he fought to free himself, the dead diver's remains pulled him downward. Panic set in as the carbon dioxide poisoning worsened. In his final moments, Shaw's movements became erratic. The cameras attached to his equipment captured his last breaths as he succumbed to the effects of the contaminated air. In a cruel irony, his body came to rest next to Dion's, creating a second tragedy in the same dark depths. Months later, when recovery teams finally reached the site, they found both bodies intertwined in the guidelines. A grim testament to the dangers of cave diving and the high price of noble intentions. The recovery mission that was meant to bring one body home had claimed another life in the process. The Nightmare of Nutty Putty. In November 2009, Utah's Nutty Putty Cave became the site of a rescue attempt that would grip the nation. John Jones, an experienced caver, had become wedged in a vertical shaft barely wider than his body. What followed was a 27-hour ordeal that would test the limits of both rescuers and victim. The passage, nicknamed the birth canal for its tight dimensions, had trapped John upside down, with his head at a downward angle. Each breath was a struggle as his own weight compressed his chest. Despite the difficult position, John remained conscious and communicative as rescuer Ryan Schertz worked to save him. For 19 grueling hours, Ryan stayed with John, talking about their families, their lives, and their plans for the future. "I'm sorry I'm so fat," John would say between labored breaths. "It would be so much easier for you guys to get me out if I wasn't so fat." Ryan promised to be his workout partner when they got out, trying to keep spirits high. The rescue team constructed an elaborate pulley system to help extract John from the narrow passage. When they first pulled, John screamed in agony. After giving him time to recover, they tried again. This time, disaster struck. The natural anchor point supporting the pulleys shattered, sending a metal carabiner flying into Ryan's face. The impact split Ryan's tongue in half, and John slipped further into the crevice. As blood filled his mouth, Ryan had to make the heartbreaking decision to leave, promising John he would return. Ryan's father took his place, determined to maintain contact with the trapped man. But John had fallen unconscious, the combination of his inverted position and the failed rescue attempt proving too much for his body. Despite heroic efforts by multiple rescue teams, John Jones died in that narrow passage less than 24 hours after becoming stuck. Today, Nutty Putty Cave stands as a sealed tomb, permanently closed with John's body still inside. A somber reminder of the unforgiving nature of cave exploration and the thin line between adventure and tragedy. The entombment of Floyd Collins. In 1925, Kentucky cave explorer Floyd Collins embarked on his final journey into the depths of Sand Cave. After 8 years of exploring and mapping Crystal Cave, his ambition led him to push deeper into unexplored territories. But 55 feet below the surface, fate had set a deadly trap. Racing against his flickering lantern light, Collins was making his way out when disaster struck. A dislodged rock, weighing nearly 30 pounds, came crashing down onto his ankle. The fall pinned him in a narrow tunnel, unable to move forward or backward. What followed would become one of America's first media sensations and a desperate race against time. News of Collins' predicament spread rapidly, drawing thousands of onlookers to the cave entrance. As rescue attempts began, the site transformed into a macabre carnival. Vendors set up stands selling food and souvenirs, while reporters filed daily updates about the trapped explorer's condition. Below ground, Collins fought for survival in the cold darkness. For 17 days, rescuers attempted various strategies to free him. They could reach Collins with food and water, but the passage was too narrow for effective rescue equipment. Engineers proposed digging a shaft to reach him from another angle, but progress was agonizingly slow. The media circus above ground continued to grow, with newspapers providing detailed coverage of every development. Collins became a household name across America, his struggle capturing the public's imagination. But while tourists posed for photos at the cave entrance, the man at the center of the spectacle was slowly succumbing to exposure and exhaustion. On the 18th day, rescuers reached Collins through their alternate shaft, only to find they were too late. He had succumbed to hypothermia, thirst, and hunger, alone in the darkness that had both fascinated and ultimately claimed him. Floyd Collins' body would remain in Sand Cave for several months before being recovered. His story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of solo cave exploration and the fine line between discovery and disaster. Would you like me to continue with the final 4 stories? And before we proceed, here's something to consider. What does the media circus around Floyd Collins' tragedy tell us about human nature? How thin is the line between concern and exploitation when disaster strikes? The Cave Creek Catastrophe. What happens when a simple tourist viewpoint becomes a death trap? In 1995, 17 students visited New Zealand's Cave Creek, expecting nothing more than spectacular views. Instead, they became victims of a tragedy that would shake the nation's faith in its most basic safety standards. The viewing platform seemed sturdy enough, jutting out over a dramatic chasm that offered breathtaking views of the cave system below. Some of the students, young and playful, noticed the slight movement of the platform and began to jump, testing its stability. It was a moment of youthful exuberance that would lead to disaster. Unknown to them, the platform harbored a fatal flaw. Built by workers with no engineering experience, it had been secured with nails instead of bolts, a shortcut taken simply because no one had brought a drill to the site. This simple oversight would cost 13 young lives. Without warning, the platform gave way. The structure didn't just tilt or partially collapse, it completely separated from the cliff face, plummeting into the chasm below. One student, through either instinct or sheer luck, managed to grab the handrail and rode the platform down, surviving the fall. The scene that followed was chaos. The surviving students, many with severe injuries, were scattered across the rocky ground. One survivor lay there with a fractured spine, surrounded by the bodies of her classmates. The remote location made rescue efforts challenging, requiring helicopters to airlift the survivors to safety. Of the 17 people on the platform that day, only 4 survived. The investigation that followed revealed a shocking pattern of negligence. Trapped in Panikin Plains. When 15 explorers descended into one of the world's deepest caves in 1988, they had no way of knowing that nature was about to turn their adventure into a desperate fight for survival. Andrew White led the team into Australia's Panikin Plains cave system, but soon found himself facing a catastrophe that would test the limits of human endurance. The first sign of trouble came with the sound of rushing water. A freak storm had hit the surface, sending a torrent of water cascading into the cave entrance. Before the team could react, the middle section of the cave collapsed, effectively splitting their group and trapping all 15 people underground. White and several others found themselves stranded on a small ledge, facing an impossible choice. Above them, the cave roof creaked ominously, threatening to collapse at any moment. Below, the churning waters had become a deadly obstacle course, filled with tumbling boulders that could crush anyone attempting to swim through. The air grew thin as hours passed, and the sound of falling rocks created a constant reminder of their precarious position. The group watched in horror as massive boulders crashed into the turbulent water below, each impact echoing through the cave like thunder. Realizing that waiting for rescue might mean death for everyone, White made a bold decision. Despite the obvious dangers, he dove into the raging waters, searching for any possible escape route. Swimming through the darkness, dodging debris and fighting against the current, he managed to find an alternative passage. Over the next 27 hours, White and others worked tirelessly to establish a rescue line through the flooded sections. The Nam Talu Cave Tragedy. Sometimes the deadliest danger in caves isn't the darkness, it's ignoring those who know it best. In October 2007, Helena Carroll and 8 other tourists dismissed local warnings about entering Nam Talu Cave during Thailand's monsoon season. Their decision would lead to one of the most haunting cave disasters in recent memory. The locals had been clear. Entering the cave during heavy rains meant certain death. But Helena, her boyfriend John Cullen, and 7 other tourists pressed on, confident in their guide's ability to lead them safely through. The cave's entrance offered no hint of the horror that awaited them within. The first warning came as a distant roar, growing louder with each passing second. Then came the water. Not a gentle flow, but a massive wall of floodwater surging through the cave system. In the chaos that followed, Helena watched helplessly as the current claimed its first victims. John and I started climbing, Helena would later recall. They watched in horror as their tour guide and a young German boy were swept away, followed quickly by a Swiss couple and their 2 daughters. The darkness made the scene even more terrifying, with screams echoing off the cave walls and mixing with the sound of rushing water. John helped Helena reach a high ledge, saving her from the initial surge, but he knew they couldn't stay there forever. "If we stay here, we are going to die," he told her. Making a fateful decision, John attempted to swim through the flood to find help. Helena watched as the love of her life disappeared into the darkness. If you want to explore more chilling tales from the depths below, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every week, we dive into new stories of survival, adventure, and the unexplained. Join our community of explorers as we uncover the world's darkest mysteries. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that really happened.